here with me, and I'm going to share something with you about Timoteo and tonight in football, eventually. But let me just share a little bit about myself. I'm scared to even say this here. I was born and raised in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx. I'm pretty dysfunctional. I know. Okay. Get it out your system. Oh, okay. But I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family. How many of us have some drama in our families? Okay, I was a victim of child abuse. I didn't know it was child abuse until many years later when I began to investigate child abuse. And I looked back, I was like, dang, that's what mommy used to do. My mom was involved with organized crime. I didn't realize that it was organized crime until I began to investigate the mafia many years later. And I looked back, and I was like, dang, that's what mommy used to do. And so I saw a girl one time at a camp. She had a t-shirt on that said, save your drama for your mom. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor. Neighbor. His mama was his drama. And now because we have little kids in the house, I grew up in the house also with two other cousins, and one cousin was a female, and she was very promiscuous, so she was doing a lot of wild stuff that little boys shouldn't see. Alright? Okay, my mom dies when I'm 13 years old, and I find out my mom is not my mom, but the girl who I thought was my cousin, that turned out to be my real mom. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor. Neighbor. Dang. Okay. So, my life began to spiral out of control. I went to an all-boys high school. 7,000 boys went to my high school, played football there. My freshman year, the football team went undefeated, unscored upon. No one ever crossed the 20-yard line. That's how good that team was. The only bad thing about a season like that, everything else is downhill from that time on. And so by the time that I was a senior playing football at that school, our team didn't look anything like that. Met my wife while I was in high school. She went to an all-girls high school. We began dating. But as soon as football season ended, my senior year of school, I quit school. And I began running the streets and hanging out with a crew that was doing some pretty bad stuff, murders and bank robberies, and I started gravitating in that direction. So I joined the military to keep from going to jail. Claudia and I got married while I was in the military. We've been married now. It'll be 45 years in October. Say neighbor. Neighbor. That brother can't be that old. Okay, so well, we got married, and I got out in 1969, 1970, I became a police officer. But when I went on the police department, and just like with my marriage, I brought a lot of baggage into the police department. I brought a lot of anger, I brought a lot of hurt, a lot of brokenness, and my past began to catch up with me. And so I began to do drugs and alcohol. I was a hypocrite as far as being a police officer was concerned. I made detective very early. I was on a SWAT team, and I was living this dual life. And I think back, and I get here tonight, having all this fun and watching you all with football. And I'm telling you right now, if my wife was here, you could ask her, what was Bill's life all about? And she would say football. I tell you what though, one of the big differences over your lives and my life is that I never had a gathering like this with men and women around me who loved Jesus and who told me about the Lord. I played football purely for the violence because I was an extremely violent young man. But my life began to bottom out. December 26, 1980 at 2:45 in the afternoon, I was watching TV. And I tell you to be real, here's the first time I think I got real in my whole life. The guy on television asked two questions. And it was almost like he was in my living room. He said, are you a sinner? I said, yeah. He said, you know Jesus? I said, no. Say neighbor. Neighbor. You know you got issues if you get an attitude with the television. and so he said, call this 800 number. And I called the 800 number. And a man explained to me the incredible love of Jesus Christ. He didn't tell me anything I hadn't heard before, but he told me a lot of things I hadn't believed before. And he said I could come to Jesus just like I was. And so I came to Jesus just like I was. Now let me just be real for 1 second here. When I talk to kids, I don't disrespect them, and I don't allow them to disrespect me. If you get disrespectful with me, I'll put you on blast. Alright? And so the deal is, I prayed with this man, and I was completely delivered from drugs and alcohol, and I was filled with love and a joy and a peace I had never had before. Claudia came home from shopping. I met her at the door, and I said, Claudia, this is the new me. Jesus came into my life. I'm born again by the Spirit of God. My name's written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor. Neighbor. Whatever you do, never say stupid stuff to a black woman. And when I said that to her, she was just like this. Yeah, right. And she thought God was going to kill me, and rather than killing me, he came into her life and came into the lives of my sons and my dad at 83 years old. I went back to work, a different police officer. I went back to work, and I didn't have to take that job personally. And I don't care what you do with some of the things I'm going to tell you today. God gave me an incredible love for kids, and that love has never ever gone away. I stayed on the police department 10 more years. And I became a chaplain at a treatment center for emotionally disturbed boys. 300 boys out of homes of abuse and neglect. I went to a place filled with kids that came out of homes just like mine. And I thought I was going to go there to be healing those kids. And God sent me there so that I could get healed. because I was still angry and I was still violent, and every once in a while, even though I loved Jesus, that stuff would come out. And then 10 years up the road, I had a dream. Now, I don't know where all of you are when it comes to Jesus. And you can do with this dream what you want, but it's a dream. I transferred into a street crime unit. Street crime, you go to work and WWE sneakers, wear your baseball hat backwards, just ride around with knuckleheads. And I was in the ministry, so wherever I would lock up, I would tell them about Jesus. Hey man, you know why you rob banks? You need Jesus in your life. You know why you murder people? Because you don't have the right relationship with God. And I would see some of these men and women give their lives to the Lord. So now I got in the street crime unit, and I was on my way to speak to kids. In the dream, it was 7:25, I had to speak at 7:30. I was walking on the double yellow line out in the middle of the street, and I came to a very modern looking school building. And all of a sudden I knew a crime was going to be committed at this school. And now I want to catch the bad guys. And so I wait a minute or two, bad guys don't come, it's getting closer to 7:30, I cross the street and I go into an auditorium. And in this auditorium there are thousands and thousands of kids. From the whitest kid to the blackest kid, from the richest kid to the poorest kid, every kind of kid you could think of was in that room. And they were as close to me as you are, but you couldn't see them. And so I asked the Lord, what does this mean? And he said, these are kids who are seated in darkness, who have not had the light of Jesus Christ to shine into their lives yet. Then all of a sudden I wanted to go catch the bad guys, and I ran out the building. And these two guys come down the street, they break into the school. And I see them. But I didn't have a weapon in the dream, and I didn't know if they had weapons, and so I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden one of the guys sees me, he calls me by name, and then they jump off this ladder, they get in the car, and they take off. And in the dream, I'm jumping up and down, and I can't catch them. And I look at my watch, and it's 7:30. And I turn to go speak to the kids. And in this dream, God speaks to me in a teenager's voice. And he says, do you want to be a police officer, or do you want to be a minister and tell kids about Jesus? And I was already both. And in the dream, I said, I want to tell kids about Jesus. And I went inside, and I began to speak to these young people, and I woke up. And I turned over in bed, and I woke my wife up, and I said, I quit today. And I went to work that day, and I gave my gun, I gave my badge, and I've never, ever looked back. And so what I share with you tonight, I believe, is the most important thing you're ever going to hear in your whole life. Tomorrow, Good Friday is predicated on what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And I'm going to try to wrap football around it. Without talking amongst yourself, if you have a team and everybody's playing together, and we always know that there's no I in team, so it's really always being together. If you have a team of guys, do you want guys to be all in or just halfway in? So you want them to be all in. So I looked up this expression, all in. The word all is in the Bible 5,218 times. The word in is in the Bible over 12,000 times. The expression all in is in the Bible 12 times. 7 times in the New Testament. And Colossians 3:17 says, and whatever you do in word and deed, do all in the name of Jesus. I think about you. What does all in look like when it comes to being a team? And I'll tell you about a young guy whose name was Jack Lucas. Old timer, born a long time ago, born on Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day represents love. So how this guy's life turned out, kind of like, wow, that's amazing that he'd be born on Valentine's Day. So he was born in 1928. 13 years later, we were bombed in Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. And so America goes to war. Jack is a pretty big kid. He waits until he's 14 years old, gets a birth certificate, forges it, and joins the United States Marine Corps. Goes to boot camp in Parris Islands, goes to advanced training. He's out in Hawaii, and he's loading ships that are going over to fight in the Pacific. The Marines find out that he's underage, so they call him in and say, Jack, you're going to have to send me home. He says, if you send me home, I'll get another birth certificate and join another branch of the military. Because he was all in as far as America was concerned. You know what? When you go to war, you're not really fighting for your country. You fight for the person to your left and to your right. You fight for your team. And so they said, okay, we'll let you stay here. You can just continue to load ships. About a week later, he stows away on one of the ships. Waits for the ship to get 2 weeks out to sea, identifies himself. They don't know who he is, though. And so they assign him to one of the combat units going to fight in the Pacific. This ship is on its way to Iwo Jima. It is one of the worst combat situations in World War II. And so Jack storms the beaches of Iwo Jima with thousands of Marines. Thousands of Marines lost their lives. So now Jack is fighting with these guys. He's all in. And now all of a sudden these Japanese soldiers sneak up on Jack and some of his friends, and they take 2 hand grenades and they throw them into a hole where Jack and his friends are fighting from. Jack sees the hand grenades.